Good evening. My name is Mark Harwood, and welcome to the cinema of Gothic horror. Today we have one of my favorite films. It's a film that I never saw in the theater. I actually caught it on the CBS late night movie, which was on in the 70s. They showed a lot of Hammer films, and this one came on one night. It seemed like it would be kind of ghoulish, and it was. And still is. It's called Chamber of Horrors, 1966. It starred Caesar Donovan, Wayne Rogers, Wilfred Hyde White, and in the main role of Jason Crevette, Patrick O'Neil. We'll talk more about Patrick O'Neil and his performance in this film. This film, I have termed it as the most violent film ever made without showing anything. There are murders where there's a body with no arms and no head. The arms of a police officer are sent to the police. All this disgusting stuff, but you never see anything, and hardly any blood at all. The film, in a way, is a follow-up to The House of Wax with Vincent Price, although it really doesn't follow the storyline. The film did use the outside facade of the House of Wax, same one that was used with the 1953 3D film. The origins of this movie are interesting in that originally it was going to be a TV show, a series, and each week the sleuths, played by Caesar Donovan and Wilfred Hyde White, who are the owners of the House of Wax, they are the artists, and they are part-time sleuth/detectives. So each week, the show would be about another murder or murderers and their way of deducting who was the murderer. But it did seem, I guess, with this pilot, that the premise of the show would be too intense as a TV show. So it was decided by the higher-ups at Warner Brothers that it would become a film. And if you look at the people who made the film, there was a lot of TV people. First of all, the director, Hy Averback, made a few films, but he was mostly known for television. And in 2 years after Chamber of Horrors came out, he would do his opus, F Troop. The composer of the soundtrack music for Chamber of Horrors was William Lava, who came up through the ranks in the 30s and 40s. He did a few Universal horror films, but after this film, he also would score F Troop. Some of the actors like Patrice Wymore, Laura Devon, you would see them in a lot of TV shows. They were in films, but this was a TV show turned into a feature film. I like it a lot. Patrick O'Neil was never in a horror film, except his first film was The Mad Magician with Vincent Price, and in a way it was a follow-up to House of Wax. But he was in a lot of movies like Alvarez Kelly, In Harm's Way. When this film came out, he was termed as the poor man's Vincent Price, which is really not fair. But I don't know if it was Hy Averback or it was Patrick O'Neil's interpretation of Jason, but it is such a wonderful performance because he's got a murdered woman on the bed who he just married. We'll talk more about that in a moment. And he's humming the marriage song. There's one scene where he's just killed Police Sergeant Jim Albertson, played by Wayne Rogers, who would in a few years be in the show MASH. He's in a horse-drawn hearse, and he's going by the House of Wax, and he tips his hat. It's a very, very wonderful performance, and he relishes it. And it's not really over the top. It's just done perfectly for this madman. Caesar Donovan and Wilfred Hyde White play Anthony Draco and Harold Blount. They are the owners, the artists, and the detectives at the House of Wax. Caesar Donovan had made some films like The Valley of Dragons, Cleopatra. Wilfred Hyde White, a great British actor, he had been in films like The Third Man and Carry On Nurse, but he might be best known to people from the 1964 film adaptation of My Fair Lady. And they're great as the artistic side of the House of Wax and as detectives. So the story takes place in, I would say, late 1800s Baltimore. It starts off with the camera tracking in on a house on the outskirts of Baltimore, and we hear a piano playing the wedding song. And we cut inside, and there's a cat looking at the piano. The camera pans over to a priest, and we see Patrick O'Neill as Jason Crevette, and next to him he's holding a woman. We see that the priest who's doing the wedding vows is very distressed, and certainly he has every right to be, because Jason is holding a woman who is dead. The priest wants to stop this, and Jason holds up a revolver, and the priest continues. And when he finishes, Jason kisses his dead bride, and he takes an envelope out and says to the priest, "I hope that this is sufficient." And the priest takes off on a gallop, literally, with his horse outside. Jason takes the young lady upstairs, humming the wedding song, puts her on the bed, and he has this thing where he takes her hair and puts it across her throat, and he starts taking out the champagne and filling up some glasses and sipping it. And then we go to the police station where Anthony Draco and Howard Blount talking with the character that Wayne Rogers plays, the sergeant, and thanking them for his helping them with some particular project. And as this is happening, they're going to another room, and Anthony Draco notices the priest coming in with the inspector. And the inspector says, "Oh, I'm sorry, this has been a horrible thing that's happened to you." So eventually they find out what's happened, and they ask Inspector Strudwick, the head policeman, can they help? And he says, no, we've got this. And as Draco and Blount walk out, Blount says, I think this might be something that we might put in our house of wax. And Draco says, it probably is an ordinary murder. And of course it's not. What I like about this film is that really never a dull moment. So now it's time for the House of Wax to open. People come in and they start going over the exhibit. And then we meet Senor Pepe de Reyes, played by Jose Rene Ruz Martinez, but credited as Tuntun. While the guests are being shown the wax figures, Harold notices someone at the front door who happens to be the butler for a Mrs. Perryman. Harold goes out to the coach which Mrs. Perryman is in. She states that she would like to see him and Anthony Draco tomorrow at her house at about 4 p.m. for tea. She has news about Jason Crevette. Okay, well, obviously, the next day, Draco and Blount go to Mrs. Perryman. We find out that Jason Crevette is her nephew, and he's stolen some jewels from her. And they get a little annoyed. Why didn't you tell Inspector Strudwick? And she had a few things to say about the inspector, because she wants Anthony and Harold to find out about Jason. And we also find out from his aunt that he does not like servants, but he does love pets. And the jewels that he took, he would be able to sell them to his quote-unquote sewer rat friends. So now Harold and Anthony are talking with Inspector Strudnick, and he has decided begrudgingly that he would like them to help in tracking down Jason. They decide that they're going to go into the red light district of Baltimore at night and see if they can find some information as to where Jason might be hiding. And so Anthony, Harold, and Pepe go to the red light district, and they go there different ways to try and find out some information. Pepe goes to a brothel. From what he hears, there is a patron who likes for the women to lie in bed with the hair over their neck and does a fake marriage. We see Jason upstairs with Madame Corona, played by Marie Windsor. He's being groomed and getting a haircut, and one of the girls is ready for him, and he goes into the room, and she's lying in bed, and he says, "Oh, no, don't talk. And he does the thing with the hair over the neck, and puts a ring on her, and he has a music box. And when Pepe, Harold, and Anthony get together, they go over their notes, and Pepe explains that he was at this brothel, and he found out that there's a guy that is with a woman every night and does a mock marriage, and they said it's got to be Jason. So they get Inspector Strudwick, they head over to the brothel, and they find Jason, and they book him. There is a scene in court which is done with reddish backgrounds. It was actually very interesting and a quick way to get to the key points, which were all the people that Jason, in his mad mind, if he makes it through this and is not hanged, will go after, such as Judge Walter Randolph and Police Sergeant Albinson, Anthony Draco. Also, Dr. Romulus Cobb, who testified at Crevette's trial. But the judge says you will be going to a prison and will be hanged. And we see Jason's eyes close. The next scene is on the train that's headed for the prison. Jason is in a railroad car, handcuffed to a policeman, and there are chickens in there. The policeman keeps sneezing at the chickens, but Jason is feeding the chickens. He's a brute, he's crazy, and he's just smiling, feeding the chickens. They're near the prison, so the policeman wants to get Jason ready, and he moves him out between the cars where there's one of those wheels that are used for the old trains to disconnect the cars from one another. He handcuffs him to this iron wheel, and he goes back to the baggage car to get things ready. Jason is looking around and he sees an axe. Now, I'm going to stop here for a second because there's one thing that I didn't mention about this film. When I first saw this on the CBS Late movie, it was the movie, all right? I didn't know anything about what I'm going to explain right now, but when this film came out, it was decided to use a little bit of William Castle showmanship. We know that William Castle made House on Haunted Hill with the flying skeleton known as Emergo, or the Tingler, where various seats were wired for a little buzz. So before the film starts, there's a narration by William Conrad where he talks about the 4 key horror points of this film, and you'll know that you're at that point in the film by use of the horror horn and the fear flasher, which is really just an annoying freeze frame at the point of the murder, and you have this red flashing light and this horn that goes off for a few seconds, and then the film proceeds, and then of course you see a knife go up in the air and it comes down, but you don't see it make contact with the victim. So Jason sees an axe and takes it down, and why he doesn't just chop the chain to the handcuffs, I don't know, but he starts chopping at the wheel, takes it off, and of course you can tell it's very heavy, and the train is now going over a river. I might want to add, they used, as normally they would, rear screen projection, but it looked like the factories in the background and the bridges were like 1966 structures, not 1896. But anyway, he jumps into the water, and that metal wheel takes him down, deeper and deeper, and now he's taking that axe and he's chopping again, and you realize that he's chopping his hand off. And finally he goes up, and there's a sort of an inlay of red that's supposed to be blood, and that's the only thing that you see of blood in the whole film. It's a month later, and we see the wheel all corroded with the handcuffs, and it was noted by Sergeant Albertson that it was found with the bones of Jason's hands in there, and the thought process is that Jason is dead. Few months go by, and we are in New Orleans. There is a man with a cape and a hat, looking very Phantom of the Opera-ish. He buys a flower, and then he goes into a building and meets a Chinese man, played by a non-Chinese actor, Berry Kroger, who had been in George Powell's Atlantis, The Lost Continent. He was the one who turned men into beasts, and he has a box for Jason. And in the box is a hook and other accessories for Jason to put on where his hand once was. After he finishes with the Chinese man, he goes across the street to a bar, and he meets a prostitute, played by Laura Devon, and he offers her a position to help him with his endeavors. not specifically mentioning that he wants to murder all the people who sent him to the gallows. So now we're back in Baltimore, and Jason sends Marie for the first victim, and that's Judge Walter Randolph. And Jason methodically starts killing these people as Jason murders the judge. And again, we don't see anything. Draco and Blount find out from Sergeant Albertson that a body with no arms and no head has been found in brown butcher paper. And that becomes one of the first wax figures presented for this particular murder. What is happening now is Jason is building a corpse made up of the people that sent him to prison. It's really kind of sickening. But again, we don't see anything. Dr. Cobb is killed and his hands are sent to the police. Then Police Sergeant Albertson, he's killed and his arms are sent because he's the arms of the law. And then it's deduced by Harold Blount that, Anthony, you're the head. Jason wants his head. So the police and Harold and Anthony are trying to trap Jason. And now they bring Marie to the House of Wax because they figure Jason is going to come there. And even though there's police all over the place, he's up on the roof. So he gets into the House of Wax by a skylight, comes down the steps, and Pepe hears some noise. Jason has some chloroform and just knocks him out and tells him, I have nothing against you. So at least Pepe is saved. And then Harold hears something and he's knocked out by Jason. Then Jason confronts Marie. Obviously, she's upset because she kind of ratted him out and she faints. Then Anthony comes in and he sees Marie lying on a table. And then all of a sudden he's confronted by Jason. And they have a vicious fight. And eventually Anthony kills Jason by pushing him onto his own wax figure, onto one of the devices that are on his hook hand, and impales him. And then we find out Harold and Anthony are talking together that Marie will probably get about 2 years because she did help Jason. Meantime, they're preparing for the House of Wax to open up. It's noted that the wax figure in the Iron Maiden, somebody has fiddled around with it. They open it up and they realize it's not a wax figure. It's a woman who's been killed in the Iron Maiden, which is basically one of those mummy cases that closes and it has spikes in it. And then Anthony and Harold tell Pepe, go get Inspector Strudwick. And they're analyzing the corpse and we get to the end titles. The film, I feel, is very enjoyable. I think that even though there was no TV show, that this film could have spawned some sequels. The characters were very enjoyable and likable. Both Caesar Donovan and Wilfred Hyde-White, and even Tonton, who plays Pepe. It is not touted as a classic, but I have watched it many times and I never tire of it. And truthfully, it's easy to say that Patrick O'Neill steals the show, but you really have to watch it because it could have been played in so many different ways. And you actually laugh at him with his mannerisms, but not in a way that, oh, he's playing the part stupidly. He plays the part to perfection. Absolutely. So, Chamber of Horrors, 1966. It is on Fandango. It is on DVD. I don't think it's come out on Blu-ray. I think if it had, I would have seen it. Interestingly enough, there is a film called Dark Intruder that was made a year before that I have not seen yet. But I actually, as of this recording, have just ordered it on Blu-ray because it's supposed to be similar. It's a black and white film. Leslie Nielsen and Judy Meredith, who had been in Jack the Giant Killer a few years before, and it's supposed to be similar in some ways. And that film story takes place in San Francisco in the 1800s. Again, that might be something worthy of our podcast. My name is Mark Harwood. You've been listening to The Cinema of Gothic Horror, and we shall return.